Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Sanders, and I'm an environmental specialist with the Siouxland District Health Department. And I'm going to talk with you today about childhood lead poisoning and the program that we do here in Woodbury County in regards to childhood lead poisoning and childhood lead poisoning prevention. So I'm going to talk about a few things, and I'm going to talk about what lead is, the health effects of lead poisoning in children, and then also what we do here in Woodbury County in regards to the childhood lead poisoning prevention program. So what is lead? So lead is a poison. And anybody who potentially could ingest lead or get lead poisoned, as you can see there in the second bullet point, it's highly toxic and it can potentially affect nearly all organ systems in the body. Here in Iowa, as well as Woodbury County, lead-based paint is the #1 cause of childhood lead poisoning. And mainly where you find lead-based paint is in homes that were built before 1978. But on the next bullet point, lead-based paint was banned from residential use in 1978. But here in Iowa, as well as here locally in Woodbury County, we have a high number of homes that were built before 1978, which potentially could mean that those homes have lead-based paint. So why was lead-based paint used? So back 100 years ago, lead-based paint was really the Cadillac of paints. It was advertised as durable, moisture resistant, it was washable, it was used as a drying agent, and it was also a paint that was advertised that it could be used for a long time. And as you can see now, it's 100 years later, over 100 years later, there are some homes that still have the lead-based paint that is still in good condition, but unfortunately we have homes that have the lead-based paint here locally that is not in good condition. I always like to share these advertisements, pictures of these advertisements, in particular the picture on the right where it says these walls don't just look good, they taste, they're yummy too. And if you can see on the bottom there, lead-based paint had flavors. And some of the flavors were pistachio, cotton candy, lemon, as well as marshmallow. Where can you find lead-based paint? So, like I said, lead-based paint was advertised as moisture resistant. So a lot of times when we do our investigations, we'll see it on the exterior of the home, and then we'll also see it in areas where there's more moisture. So that really is like the windows as well as doors of homes. So again, lead-based paint can be found in pre-1978 homes. And it can be found both on the interior and exterior of the homes. So on the interior, just some of the places where we found it when we do our investigations, windows, we find it a lot in windows, also along baseboards. We found it in bathtubs, walls, doors, and then as well as the door trim. And then on the outside, of course, the exterior paint, as well as porches, garages, the eaves, which are the overhangs, up high, and then also railings. And I wanted to share this picture with you all, but this just really shows when lead-based paint was used. And you can see before 1940, lead-based paint was used in almost 100% of the homes here in the United States. And then as we get into the newer homes, 1940 to 1959, it was still used, but not as much. And then in the 1960s and 70s, lead-based paint was really being removed from the paint, and then officially it was banned by law in 1978. But you can see those older homes built before 1940, a lot of them were built with lead-based paint. So the health effects of lead poisoning in children. So the first thing is just awareness that yes, here in Woodbury County, the state of Iowa, lead poisoning is an issue. And that is something that I hear a lot, especially from parents who have children who are lead poisoned. That they tell me, I just did not know that this was still an issue. And I do tell them, as long as we have homes that were built before 1978, lead-based paint, lead poisoning, will continue to be a public health problem here locally as well as statewide. The CDC has come out with information that there is no known safe level of lead in the blood. Even low levels, less than 5 micrograms per deciliter, have shown to have negative effects on a child's intelligence. And then oftentimes children do not show signs of lead poisoning. Some of the first signs of lead poisoning are a child's easily excitable, they can't pay attention. And for those of us that know children, have been around children, have children ourselves, that's kind of a normal thing. Children get excited, they can't pay attention. So it's really hard to tell if the child is lead poisoned. So, like I said, often children show no signs of lead poisoning. In addition, the only way to know if a child is lead poisoned is through a blood lead test. So typically, the first initial blood lead test is a capillary test, and that's a finger poke. And then if that comes back high, a venous blood lead draw is definitely recommended, just so that that venous blood lead draw does give you a better, is that confirmatory test for that. In addition, lead poisoning can occur at any age for children as well as adults. But here in Woodbury County, we focus on children age 6 and under. And then, like I said, childhood lead poisoning will continue to be a health concern, and that's just because of the number of homes here in Woodbury County that were built before 1978. And then also, like I said, just the lack of public understanding, public awareness that lead poisoning is still an issue. And so, in particular for children, lead toxicity can affect every organ system in the body. So you can see the first bullet point there says lead inhibits the bodies of growing children from absorbing iron, zinc, and calcium. And these are minerals that are essential to brain development and nerve development. In addition, it's been shown that lead poisoning can cause developmental delays, learning difficulties, lower IQ, and it has also been linked to ADHD. And then also medical research, has established a connection between early childhood lead exposure and then also future criminal activity. And then for children, the immediate health effects is typically neurological, but long-term lead exposure can also lead to effects later in life. And you can see on the bottom there, that can include hypertension, renal effects, reproductive problems, as well as developmental problems with the offspring. It's important to also note, every child's a little bit different. Long-term effects could be due to lead poisoning, can be because of a whole host of things, and mainly that is from the length of time that they were lead poisoned, as well as, the child's nutrition. So young children are most at risk for lead poisoning, and that is because young children have a higher tendency to have that hand-to-mouth activity. So what happens and why children become lead poisoned is the deteriorated lead-based paint turns into a lead dust. And then it can either fall onto the floor or inside the windows or into the bare soil. And those young children are either playing on the floor or they're playing, especially if it's nice outside and the windows are open, they're playing in the windows, looking outside the windows, and they get those lead chips or lead dust onto their hands. And again, they have the high hand-to-mouth activity. And so they ingest the lead dust, and that's typically the most common way that they become lead poisoned. But in addition to that, you just think of the number of toys, blankets, pacifiers, bottles that are on the floor or fall on the floor, and those can also collect lead dust and can also be a source of lead poisoning as well. I'm just going to share the next few slides. I am going to share a few pictures of lead-based paint, and just to reiterate how lead poisoning can occur. So the two pictures on the left, that is deteriorated lead-based paint, and deteriorated lead-based paint has this alligator type cracking. I don't know how else to explain it, but that is typically what it looks like when it's lead-based paint and it's in bad condition. And then again, that lead-based paint chips off, it becomes lead dust, And that's where the concern is anytime we see that deteriorated lead-based paint. But in addition to that, we have what's called as chewable surfaces, and that's the picture on the right there. And you can see for the most part, that surface is in good condition, except for that one area where you can see some teeth marks. And that's a concern as well, because under those layers of paint could potentially be some lead-based paint, and that could also be a cause or a source for lead poisoning. And just a few more pictures just to give you a good idea also of lead poisoning and lead dust and how it falls into the floor. But you can see, I'm going to focus on the picture on the right here, and that's a threshold. And you can see again that alligator type cracking that is happening. And what our concern would be is, number one, people are walking in, they get those lead chips on their feet, on their shoes, and they're tracking in the lead paint that way. And then also on the bottom left, you can see that that is a window where lead chips have fallen into that window trough. And again, and especially in the winter months, or I apologize, the warmer months, spring and fall, where the windows are open, children tend to play in the windows. They like to look out the windows, and they can become lead poisoned that way. The top left picture is again of deteriorated lead-based paint on a threshold in between two rooms. You can see the paint chips that have fallen on the floor. And again, that same concern where the paint turns into the lead dust. And then also the exterior can be a source of lead poisoning as well, especially in those warmer months where the children are playing outside and they're playing in the dirt or whatever it may be, or on the front porch, and they get those paint chips onto their hands and they ingest the paint chips that way. So lead poisoning is preventable. So I don't want to scare you, but it is preventable. So again, awareness is key. Awareness is key to preventing lead poisoning. So number one is all children should be tested for lead poisoning, whether they live in a house. Of course, if they live in a house that was built before 1978, but this also includes any of the activities down below. So children at higher risk for lead poisoning should be tested more often. And that's something we definitely encourage you to speak with your child's healthcare provider. And more often could be, depending on the risk, that could be once a year, could be every 6 months. That's definitely something that we encourage you to talk to your child's healthcare provider about. But again, higher risk are those children that live or spend time in a home that was built before 1978. And when I say spend time in a home, that could be a daycare, that could be a family member's house, a grandparent's house, aunt, uncle, whatever it may be, friend's house, just being aware of that. Also, on the third bullet there, immigrants, refugees, or recently adopted from less developed countries. Sometimes we get alerts where the people who are coming in from other countries are using medicines that have lead in them, and children have tested high for lead as well as the adults. And again, they're just not aware of what lead poisoning is and the effects of lead poisoning. Live or spend time with someone who works with lead or has hobbies that expose them to lead. This is anybody that may be in the construction and who rehabs homes with lead-based paint, or even someone who has hobbies. A big thing, even a few years ago, we would see a lot of times is people would buy those older windows that had been removed from homes or whatever it may be, and they would refurbish them to be picture frames or something like that. We don't see it as much now, but this was definitely a big deal a few years ago. Not only are those people potentially could get lead poison, but now they're bringing it home and exposing their family members, young children, to lead poisoning as well. In addition, eating spices or foods that are imported from outside the U.S., and even some candies as well, from those international food specialty stores. And again, those particular spices and foods just have not gone through that testing that's required here in the United States to ensure that lead is not in them. And then again, I really encourage you to talk with your child's healthcare provider, and if they have any of these risks, tests or even something that's not mentioned here, please talk with them about getting your child lead poisoned. So here in Woodbury County, blood lead testing is low. And if testing does happen, it's typically done only at 12 months of age. And that is because children are becoming more mobile and that increased hand to mouth activity. In addition to that, here in the state of Iowa, a child does have to have one blood lead test before they enter kindergarten. So a lot of times that's done at 12 months of age, and then you're good to go to enter kindergarten. But if those blood lead tests come back high, a lot of times that follow-up isn't done, and that blood lead test is not scheduled for the next time. So we really encourage you to work with your child's healthcare provider to talk about lead and just have it on your radar. And then in addition to that, like I said, lead poisoning can occur at any age. And I do want to highlight just a few, the cases that we worked on here last year in 2020. In 2022, we had 3 children who lived in Woodbury County who were hospitalized, and they received chelation medicine due to their high blood lead levels. And what chelation means, it's a medicine where the medicine removes the lead from the blood. And when we have a chelation case here in Woodbury County, it's literally everything stops and that's all we work on, just because we need to figure out right away what is going on, where is that child getting that source of lead. But then in addition to that, because these children are hospitalized and their lead levels are so high, they can't go back into their home until that home is deemed lead safe. So not only do we have to inspect the home, their main home where they're getting lead poisoned from, but we also have to inspect another home that they can be released or discharged to that's lead safe before they can even go back to the home that is not lead safe. And actually, they can't go back into the home until we deem it lead safe. And I hope that makes sense. And then in particular, all 3 children who were hospitalized last year were above the age of 2. So that's very important to remember is, like I said just a minute or two ago, that typically blood lead testing is done only at 12 months of age. And these 3 children were above the age of 2 who had to be hospitalized because their lead levels were so high. In addition to the 3 chelation cases, we had 4 separate cases of children who had lead levels above 20. And then all the 7 children received services from the Siouxland District Health Department. And I'll touch on that in the next slide. But it's also important to remember that to highlight that all the children had lived in or regularly visited homes that were built before 1978. And that is how they became lead poisoned. So I just want to give you a quick rundown of what happens here when there is a lead poisoned child. So number one, all lead tests are sent to a state database, but we don't receive an alert until that capillary and venous blood lead test is at 10 micrograms per deciliter. So again, like I had said earlier, even low levels below 5 micrograms per deciliter can cause potential long-term effects and we don't receive an alert until that blood lead level is at 10. So from 10 to 14, typically what we do, the prevention is we call the parent, and then we also send a letter out to the parent highlighting our discussion as well as prevention for lead poisoning. And then we also encourage, again, depending on that lead level, it is required that the child receive a follow-up test to determine if the lead level is going higher or lower. Now, once the child's venous blood lead level, again, so this has to be a venous blood lead level because that's the confirmatory. Once it's a 15, that's where we start services where we do go into the home. So 1 blood lead test, 15 to 19, a nurse and a dietitian visit the home. And then if there's 2 blood lead tests or one venous blood lead test of 20 or above, then that's where we go in and do our environmental investigation. And that's what I do here is the environmental investigation. So I'll touch on that here in the next slide. But it's also important to note that these standards are all set by the state of Iowa. So that's why the different lead levels in our follow-up, that's what we're required to do for the state of Iowa. So when I go in and do an environmental investigation, my main goal is to determine where that child is getting lead poisoned. So we talk with the parent. We provide education materials. I show them pictures of the deteriorated lead-based paint, like I just showed you all. And yeah, the parents will say, "Yep, that's in that's in here. I've seen my child playing in the windows or whatever it may be." In addition to that, we talk about prevention techniques, different short-term methods to make sure to prevent ongoing exposure. When the nurse, we talk about diet, but also the nurse dietitian really go over that, as well as developmental assessment. And then we do test every room inside that property, bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, basements, pantries. We test everything. And we're testing everything within that room. So if there's a window, we test the window, door, walls, baseboards. Like I said, we've found lead-based paint on bathtubs. We're testing bathtubs. And then in addition, we go to the outside of the home and we test the outside. And that includes, yes, the railings, the porch, doors, outside windows, the paint, and then also garages as well. What we use when we do our investigations is an XRF analyzer. And literally we find out right then when we're doing our investigation if it's lead-based paint or not. And then we determine if the lead-based paint is in good condition, bad condition, if it's deteriorated. If deteriorated lead-based paint is found, what that means is that property is now an open address on our end. And that property owner is required to follow up in regards to laws, essentially by the EPA as well as the state of Iowa. They are required to ensure that they fix the home properly, that they're trained, that they hire trained folks on how to remove or get rid of that lead-based paint safely. So not only does the people living in the home, they don't become lead poisoned, but their workers don't become lead poisoned as well. And then in addition to that, once it's an open home, we're required to send a 30-day follow-up letter after the initial investigation, but also we are required to send letters every year to open addresses in Woodbury County, just wanting to know the status and what that property owner is doing to correct the lead hazards in their home. So that's what happens before, during, and after an environmental investigation when there's a lead poisoned child. So again, that's a lead poisoned child that has one venous blood lead test of 20 or above. And then in addition to that, 2 venous blood lead tests of 15 to 19. That's when we go into the home and do the environmental investigation. I just wanted to show you a picture of what an XRF analyzer looks like. This is not our XRF analyzer, but just to give you a good idea, ours is very similar where we put it on the surface. There's a little screen on that analyzer, and it will give us the lead level. And anything above at or above 1.0 means that lead-based paint is present. So, and just real quickly, so if the address is opened, then we're required to close it. And closing an address does take time. This is not something that happens the next day. Quite honest, it can take months, even for some folks, years. So basically, when we open an address, if somebody thinks that their address is ready and lead safe, they call us here at the health department, myself and a coworker, and we go back out and we do a clearance inspection. And basically what that clearance inspection means is we do a visual assessment of the entire property on the interior and exterior. And if we see any deteriorated lead-based paint, obviously that property does not pass. But if the property looks good visually, Then we do dust sampling. And literally, this is where the property has to be white glove clean. We can't see any visible dust or anything like that because, again, that could be that lead dust. And then this is the threshold that that each area has to pass in order for the property to be deemed lead safe. And so we test several rooms in the property, and then we test floors, in the window sills and the window troughs, and then all those samples get sent to our state hygienic lab for testing. And if they pass those thresholds, then we can deem the property lead safe, and then we can close it out. So just to wrap up, again, some of the things that I've already said is yes, lead poisoning will continue to be a public health concern here in Woodbury County, as well as Iowa, just because of the number of homes built before 1978. I'm sure you guys pass these homes, you can probably see now that you've seen pictures of what deteriorated lead-based paint looks like. You could probably think in your mind the number of homes that you pass on a regular basis, on going about your day when you're driving or whatever it may be, that you can see the lead-based paint just chipping off that exterior of the home. Again, lead poisoning is preventable, and awareness is prevention. And just knowing what lead-based paint is, the effects of lead-based paint on, in particular, children, and really getting your children in to get tested is what we encourage. And again, because children, their growing bodies, their brains are growing, they are most vulnerable to the effects of lead poisoning. And then the only way to know if a child is lead poisoned is through that blood lead test. So again, please talk with your child's healthcare provider to get them tested for lead poisoning. And then, like I said earlier, here in Woodbury County, unfortunately, we have a low level of blood lead testing. And then also, all blood lead testing should be done at the child's healthcare provider office. So thank you so much for having me present. I really appreciate your time. Just a few things before I end my presentation. The first one is I do coordinate a Siouxland Healthy Homes Coalition, and that coalition meets every other odd month. Our next meeting is Monday, March 20th, 2023. We also do have newsletters on even months. So if you want to be included on the Healthy Homes Coalition contact list, whether to attend meetings or just to receive updates, newsletters, please contact me. In addition, we do want to start meeting in particular with folks in the community, including healthcare providers, property owners, parents, specifically for lead poisoning prevention. So that is something that I do plan to start moving on here within the next few months. And if you'd like to get involved with a lead coalition, please contact me at my email below. Also, in addition to that, I am available to present to your organization either in person or virtually. And I really would like to partner with you all in regards to lead and lead poisoning, working with especially those early childhood professionals who go into the home or daycares or whatever it may be. I want to work with everybody, but really working with them. If you think a child has ADHD or anything like that, really working with you and education about, let's get them tested for lead. Could that be because they're lead poisoned? So if you have any questions, or if you would like for me to come and present to your organization, either in person or virtually, please contact me. But other than that, again, thank you for your time. And any questions, further comments, please contact me at that information on the bottom there. Thank you.